All right. Well, you have to smile before we hit record. So,
That's right.
all right. So, welcome to the Get It Done podcast. I'm your host, Jimi Ryan, and today I am blessed to have a really just close personal friend of mine, Brian Kludt. He is someone that, to me, is so much more than, I mean, technically you're my manager, but it's so much more than that to me. I look at you as a friend, a leader, really just an inspiration to me to move forward and to get things done. And you are if you read your website, you are a nationally known speaker, nationally known author, coach, all those things that a lot of times people look at it like, oh, you're a coach, great, or oh, you're this, great. But I think that you've done every single thing that every piece of your, I guess, profile is like next level. It's just this level of excellence. So I'm really blessed to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. Wow, what a great introduction. Appreciate it, brother. And thought is, the feelings and admiration are mutual. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump right into it. The Get It Done podcast is really about the come up story. So the way I like to describe this is that, like for instance, Elon Musk, he's a guy that has achieved something crazy. He's one of the richest men in the world. And his story from 1 million to 1 billion is a story, but I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in the 0 to 1 million story. Mm-hmm. And part of that really shapes who we are. And I believe is just really the source of most of the inspiration that we get throughout our lives. And for you, Brian, I've heard bits and pieces of it, but I've never heard the whole thing. So I'd like to first kind of back up, give a bird's eye view. Is there anything that I missed in, I guess, giving you in my edification of you that you would want to share that, like, hey, these are kind of like major things that I, Brian Kludt, am?
I think that the one thing that I would like to share is, something that I'm super proud of, that I was able to write a book a couple years ago. And I don't even know if I've talked to you about that, but
you never have. All I've done is seen it on your website.
It's interesting because, it actually stemmed from my, before I even got into the industry, it talked about what was going on in my life as a kid. And I went through a really, really tough transition when I was 12 or 13 or so, when my parents split up. And I wrote a story about my experience spending this summer. I think I was 12 or 13 again. I spent my summer with my grandmother. And it wasn't until I was about 40 years old that I realized these life lessons that I learned through that really difficult time. And realized that it really kind of built a lot of my life philosophies. And so, the book is out there. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Found Lake. And, the reason I just bring that up is because, any of the profits that we get from that, we give to charity. But, I just think one of the biggest values that I have in my life is trying to encourage and inspire other people to recognize that they've got their own superpower and that there's things that they're really, really good at. But for most of us, myself included, when I was a kid, there are a lot of fears, there are a lot of insecurities that, fortunately over time, I was able to really overcome and, put myself in a position where I've got a pretty cool life. And so again, what I'm trying to do is take as much of that and share it with people to give them hope. And hopefully the book itself is one of those ways that I can impact people. So that's the only thing I would add.
Well, look, you're such a blessing to me in that regard. I think that too many times, I've worked for a lot of people that don't want to really work on your superpower. They want to work on all your weaknesses. And I think that that's something that makes you super unique just as a person. I think just to see it in people, their superpower is one thing, but then to act on it and actually inspire them to grow it's something completely different. And I think that makes you incredibly unique and such an inspiration and a great leader. So let's go back. So you're talking about this was 12 years old. So your parents split up. Mm-hmm. What was pre that? So what was before that happened? What was life like, in the Kludt house? Where were you born, actually? That's a good place to start.
Yeah. So I was born in Milwaukee. My parents, we lived in, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 different places between the time I was born and the time I was in first or second grade. So, my parents were very young. My dad was in a rock and roll band. My mom was a go-go dancer. That's how they met. So I'm literally a child of hippies. Um, and I grew up in that. I grew up in a music household. I remember my childhood as being a really cool place. I had really cool hip parents. I had a sister who was 4 years younger than me. And all the years in my life, between some of my earliest memories when I was 4 or 5, and when my parents split up, I would say it was like the idyllic childhood. We moved around a lot, but I felt loved. I felt appreciated. I had good friends. I had confidence. All the things that you want for your kids, I think I had.
Even despite moving all over the place?
Yeah, and I think as a kid, it's like you don't know what you don't know, and that was just part of life. And I remember there were challenges associated with having to acclimate myself to new environments, but in each case, I think I did a pretty good job of overcoming it. And I think it built some of those kind of emotional intelligence strengths, just having to go in and be the new kid in the school. But I never saw it as anything that was really disruptive or anything that was really a difficult childhood, so to speak. That's just how things were.
I mean, it's kind of odd, truly, because most people that change places where they live, especially several times, have such a challenge with that. I moved one time in 3rd grade, and it just like I had no friends, and it was terrible for me. Just like I had a bunch of friends over the other place, and then you lose that, and you just totally embraced it and went with it.
And I didn't know any difference. I say that my parents were footloose fancy free, which is, I think it's a Rod Stewart album, but that's just kind of the way that I was raised. And, I remember having a lot of adventure. I mean, at one point we moved to northern Wisconsin, and we were in the Minocqua Woodruff area for a summer. So I remember uprooting in 1st grade and going from a school to another school. And I think there was like a month left of school because my dad was going to run a resort in northern Wisconsin. So, I remember that transition. And that summer was just like the coolest summer of my life. I mean, here I'm on a lake, we've got a resort, all these cool people coming in, get to fish and water ski and all this kind of stuff. And that lasted for a summer. And, just my parents were just trying to figure life out. And so I think it was the end of 1st grade into the second grade that we actually moved to Wauwatosa, just outside of the Metro Milwaukee area, and quote, settled in. We stayed in the same house for a couple of years, but from 2nd grade through probably 6th grade or so, I look at those as like some of the greatest times in life. And it was just a cool time to be a kid. I mean, it was literally that time where people talk about you go out and parents would say, come home when the lights, when the street lights turn on. I mean, that was what life was like for us. It was a blast.
Wow. How much has time changed? I mean, it's completely different nowadays. So, I mean, it seems like everything's hunky dory. I mean, so everything's hunky dory. And I guess when you're this age, do you realize that your parents are headed towards something bad, or was it something that you're just blindsided with?
It's a great question. I mean, I think of myself as a pretty introspective person, and I like to be very self-aware. I think it's a good, it's one of the most important, self-awareness, I think, is one of the most important skill sets that we can all develop. And so, I don't think that I dwell in, looking at and evaluating what happened in my childhood. But the older I get, the more things I realize I start to learn from that. And, I don't think that I saw any indicators that there were challenges or problems. And so I would say, for the most part, up until maybe, a couple months before they split up, it really hit me. Like, it was a major, major surprise. And I vividly remember to this day exactly where I was in my living room, looking at my dad, who was sitting on the couch, and he had me, and he called me in, and he had his hands, like, in his head in his hands, and he broke down. He was sobbing, and he said, "Your mom and I are getting a divorce." And I remember it was like, people talk about these these moments of reality when like they get like reality hits them, and I remember that moment, and it was like this infusion into like the transition from childhood to adulthood, right? And I remember thinking that my dad is expressing and demonstrating this incredible vulnerability, and at the same time, there's something really profound about the fact that he was sitting down and I was standing over him as he's telling me this information, and realizing my life is about to change, and it's about to change radically. I don't even know what that looks like. I was void of emotion at the time. I don't remember, crying or breaking down or begging them to, figure it out. But just that snapshot in time is something that I'll never, ever forget.
Wow. I mean, my parents divorced too. It wasn't as a defining moment like that, because I was young. I was 5. I have to imagine the older you are, the harder that really is. And like, yeah, I mean, reality check, things are changing. So what happened? I mean, so wait, you're in 6th grade. So like, middle school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gotta be like the worst time. It's just gotta be the worst time.
Yeah.
Divorce is terrible anyway, but I mean, it's happening. What next? What do you remember?
So the what next, the what next part of the story is pretty amazing. The next thing I remember is, and literally again, one of those moments in time, I've got as screenshots, like it's a movie playing in my mind. I'm in a 1973 Cadillac in the back seat, and anybody look up a 1973 or 71 Cadillac. I mean, these things are massive.
It's a boat. Yeah, it's a huge
just a
thing.
boat.
Yeah.
And I'm riding up to northern Wisconsin with my uncle who's driving, and my great grandmother who's in the front seat. So my uncle is driving my great grandmother up to her lake home in St. Germain, Wisconsin. And the part of the story here is that at some point in time, my dad said, "You're going to live with your grandma this summer," not my great grandma. So I had my grandmother, my dad's mom, also had a lake home in northern Wisconsin. And, he decided that he thought it would be a good idea to just kind of get me out of the fray, like get me out of the dynamics, of my mom and dad trying to, figure things out. And so, sent me 250 miles to live with my grandmother, who I really didn't know that well at all. And, she at the time must have been probably in her late 50s. So all of her kids are grown up, and, they're sending this 12, 13-year-old kid to live with her in the summer. The very next thing, I remember getting out of the car, just thinking like, I don't want to be here. I just want to be at home with my friends. I want to be like at home with my family. And I'm going to see this grandma that I don't really know very well. And I get out of the car, and she's there to greet us. And she hollers at me to get out of her flower bed. And I'm like, this thing is going from bad to worse. And Jimmy, I literally, I think I stayed in my room for the first 5 days. Like, I don't think I left the room ever, until she finally came in one day and said, essentially, if we're going to figure this out, if we're going to spend the summer together, we're going to do it, and we're going to figure out a way to get along, and we're going to figure out a way to get through things. And it's not going to be you locking yourself in the room. And, so it's like, well, if anybody should be a victim at this stage, it's me. And then I remember my grandma breaking down and crying. It was another, one of these moments in time where I realized.
Geez, though. I mean, you've been locked in a room for 5 days. I have to imagine she's just like, what do I even say to this kid?
Yeah.
I mean, like, what a tough spot. So, and she breaks down and cries. Go ahead.
And then, years later, it wasn't until, kind of the rest of the story. It wasn't until years later that she confessed, admitted to me. She said, "I didn't want you." Like, well, and I said, "Well, I figured that out when you told me to get out of the flower garden." But, my dad, for some reason, thought, that would be a better place for me to be. And the interesting thing about that story, and there's so many layers to this, but, my grandma had been married like 3 times. in her life. No, 3 or 4. She was married 3 times, divorced 3 times. She had like 10 kids and always had this really, really contentious relationship. So it was really ironic that my dad sends me, of all people, to go and be mentored by my grandma for the summer. Where my mom was during this entire time, I have no idea. Like, I don't know what happened. But and we can touch on this a little bit more, but the rest of the story and that whole book that I wrote was about this whole journey, this experience of being really effectively forced to live with my grandma, and what happened in the context of our relationship throughout that summer, and some of the themes of reconciliation and love and forgiveness and grace. Again, it was probably my early 40s before I started to realize what that summer was all about. But it was a pretty amazing experience.
So she doesn't want you, but she puts up with it anyway.
Yeah.
You don't want it. Nobody wants this. And you're 12 years old. I mean, like, she's in such a position. So I guess that moment happens. What did you just like snap out of it and like go a different way? Like, was that just a complete paradigm shift at that moment? Or was it, I have to admit, you're young and immature. I mean, you are, like, how do you comprehend this at that age? But it seems like you kind of did. It's still.
I think what I learned from her is, I learned a lot about forgiveness. I learned a lot about redemption. My grandma and I ended up becoming super, super close and spent many actually subsequent summers together. And, when right before she died, we had actually built a lake house, probably 25 miles from where I spent my summers, because that just became a part of who I am. It became a part of my DNA. And so Kathy, my wife Kathy and I built a lake home. It's been about 10 years now. And, we decided that we were going to create this home with intention. Like, this was going to be a retreat. It was going to be a place where people could relax. It would be all about reconciliation. It would be about recreation. It was a retreat. We've had so many people to the lake house, and it's been so much more than just, hey, it's a great place we can get away. It's been places where we've been able to intentionally create experiences for people. And the cool thing is that we selected, when we were building the house, we selected a stain color that's kind of this, it's almost like barn red, a little bit closer to burgundy, but it was selected because it was an homage to my grandma's place on Found Lake, the place that I had spent my summers, that had that same red. And so right before she died, we were able to take her over to the house and just say, it's kind of getting me choked up thinking about it, but this is your legacy. This is what, that experience of us spending that summer together, and all of the difficulties that we had to go through, and all of the things that I've become, have been so much due to you and what you did to pour into me, in a stage, in a place in life that you didn't have to bring me in. You could have said no. But I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she saved me. She saved me from some really bad things. And so, to be able to bring her in the year before she passed, to see the legacy carried on in a whole new way, was pretty cool.
I mean, fulfilling, to say the least. I feel that too. How cool. I mean, you're probably just so proud of that. Like, that's probably like one of the coolest things that you've probably ever been able to do. Awesome. Well, I'm just thinking about, I mean, she had to have cried. I mean, she had to have been like, wow, it's so cool.
I mean, she was a bit, it's fun because even talking about it now, I mean, she was pretty protective. She would get angry, but I don't remember her getting really emotional and sappy, or crying or anything like that. But there were a few times that she did, and I think the thing that I learned most from her in those experiences was just literally unconditional love. Unconditional love. And, you know, after my parents split, my dad was remarried, and I grew up in just an incredibly stressful family situation. My stepmother was like literally the epitome of the evil stepmother. And I mean, there were physical altercations with her. There was emotional stuff going on. I mean, if there's one stage of life that I look back on and say it's really hard for me to go back to, it was that period between probably 13 and 18. Uh, but the key was every single summer I had my escape. I got to go, as soon as school's out, I would ride up to Found Lake, and I'd get to spend the summer with my grandma, which we called her Granny, which, how appropriate is that?
That's funny.
And it was every year. It was like there was redemption. Every year there was a new season, because it seemed like the cycle in my life went from starting the school year strong, slowly running out of steam because of all of the dysfunction that was going on at home, and then by the end of the school year, it was like I gotta go. And
Wow.
yeah.
And so more on, so Granny, unconditional love and forgiveness. I have to imagine that was something that was a real struggle for you. I mean, how could it not be? It's struggle for everybody, but at that particular moment in your life, it must be just the hardest thing. Do you think that because of, I feel like all things happen for a reason. I truly believe that. It's just like, what am I being taught right now? And at 12 years old, can you actually like be humble enough and like, I guess, actually realize that? But I think that she probably just ingrained it into your head, the love and forgiveness. And with your mom, especially, like if she's out of the picture, and with a stepmom in the picture, that's, a super stressful relationship, I guess, how did she instill this unconditional love into you? I guess, how did she get it through a 12-year-old skull that like, look, this is like, you need to forgive. Yes, this has happened, but you need to move on, and you need to do this. Like,
Yeah.
As a father myself, like I want to be able to do that. I guess, how do you think Granny did it?
I think that she, there's this fun, I don't know if this is a coping mechanism, a defense mechanism, or a skill. Maybe it's a combination of all three, but I've always had this ability to embellish to some degree, and infuse things with a bit of a positive spin, things that happen in my life. And I think that's natural, right? If you go through traumatic moments, you look back and you romanticize things. In fact, one of the criticisms that I had from some of the people in my family about the book that I wrote is they said, that's not Granny. Like, that's not who she was. She didn't say that. But, I like to say, maybe it wasn't. But the things that I think about that I learned from those periods, I drew from her and from the experience. And so I'm attributing some of the quote unquote credits to her with intentionality, when maybe she didn't mean it that way. But I remember there was just an incredible sense of empowerment. She would really encourage me. She was one to say all the time, follow your dreams, follow your dreams. And, I don't know, maybe it sounded a little bit hokey, but I never felt like she was holding me back. She saw some things in me that she called out as what we might call greatness, or superpowers, and she really encouraged me, and supported, and acknowledged. I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, and I had this this ability to look at a picture and just replicate it. And I drew these chipmunks and squirrels, and she just loved it, right? But anything that I was doing well, she was just always over the top. And I think that, even now that we're talking, I'm thinking about this, but I think what she was able to do is to tease out the greatness within me. Whereas, if I think about what I was experiencing at home, it was just the opposite. I remember living in an environment that was extremely judgmental and very one of the lines that my dad said to me all the time is, "You're just not responsible." I mean, that just resonates through my mind. And, you know, Granny was the one that saw me the way that I think we're supposed to see ourselves. And as I think about raising my kids, I think I am constantly, calling out the greatness that I see in them and encouraging them in ways. And a lot of it is like we do things that are just the opposite of what our parents did. And, I love my dad, and my dad challenged me in great ways. And my dad did a lot of great things, but the environment that I was in with my dad and my stepmother was not conducive to that. And my grandma was able to do that.
I love, this is a great quote, tease out the greatness. That's awesome. Like that really is cool, because that's like, it's almost tricking your kid into, doing the thing that you want them to do. Like, but tease out the greatness. How awesome is that? I have to imagine your stepmom's not like, here, you're just part of the picture. And your dad's probably just trying to keep both sides into the,
Totally.
Perspective is there, but like, it's really incredible that you could have that experience at that age. And Brian, like, you emanate finding people's greatness. I mean, I just, like, if there's one thing that you are awesome at, it's finding people's superpower, or at least, I don't know, man. I think you do. I think you tease out the greatness. I think that's just a great, to sum you up in a tweet, it's that you do that with everybody. And the truth is, that's why people love you so much. It's because it's like, you feel at home. You feel like you're being understood. Like, you get me, is my personal feeling with it. But maybe you're just teasing out my greatness too, but it's not fake. It doesn't have to be a trick. Like, it's good. There's nothing wrong with it. Is there anything you would add to that time of your life? Because it just seems like this is like stake in the ground, you're going a different way type of a thing. And like,
yeah, I think it was a tale of two cities. I think it was there was like this redemptive cycle to, kind of a destructive cycle, and it would repeat itself every year. And, I think it really carried on through, heading off to college. I mean, I probably wasn't ready to go to school at the time, but it was good for me. I mean, any time that I would get away from home was a good thing. And, I think I was very immature. And so I had a lot of struggles through decisions that I was making. I think about, here's something that I'll go on now that I'm officially on record. When I was a sophomore in college, I went to lacrosse my first year. I came home for a year, went back to lacrosse. I founded a party house. So I'm 20 years old.
You founded a party house?
Founded a party house. It was called The Pit. And
wait. Okay, hold on a second. What is a party house? Like, is it just stereotypical what I'm thinking? Like, it is a house where everybody has parties, or this is like an official
party every night. I mean, I learned how to become a really good marketer because I'm a cartoonist, right? And so I would draw these little advertisements, and I'd say things like, party at the pit until your brains fall out of your heads. Just stupid stuff. And I draw these little cartoons, and we take them to Whitney, which is the food hall, and we'd find like the most beautiful girls we could and give them this $2 off, the pit kind of thing. Because it was just, we were promoting, I just wanted to have fun. That's what I desperately wanted in my life. I just wanted to have fun. And that semester, I was put on academic probation. So I effectively got kicked out of school, and I had a 0.5 GPA.
I love that. I don't know why I love that, but I just do. Like, that's 0.5. So bad, right?
I had three D's and an F, and the F, I had a class that I didn't know that I had until I got until the grades came out. In other words, I forgot to drop it.
That's just the worst. It's like a 0.
So I came back. I came back from school, and I just said, okay, I need a granny. I need a Found Lake experience. And
right.
Without knowing what to do, and maybe knowing that what I drew from that experience was only going to take me so far, I signed up and I went into boot camp in the Air Force. Like,
how old were you when this?
20.
Okay, you're 20. So sophomore, like I mean, if you're 20, I mean, you must be about to turn 21. So you're like here, I'm not going anywhere at lacrosse, 0.5. So got to do something different.
Yeah.
But how did that come about? Was it just like, bing, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to.
You know what? I had a buddy of mine, Kurt Hakenen, and he and I were out. We'd go out partying every night. And
well, you party at the pit.
No, this is after the pit. So this is I'm out of the pit. I'm back home, and he and I were out at a bar one night, and I said, "Let's do this. Let's go in the Air Force." And so, we both went to the MEPS, and we took the ASVAB, and we took all the tests, and they said, "Man, like, you can literally, like, the test you took, you can take whatever you want." I think that was the first time in any professional realm or setting I recognized that I had an aptitude, because I took all these tests, and they said, you can pick whatever career path. And it wasn't just like a sales job. It was literally like the scores that I had. They said, you can pick whatever career path you want. And
did that surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, it did. It did. But I also remember thinking to myself, I remember feeling the same way that I had felt as a young boy, like pre-12. I remember, because at that time in life, I thought, my dad would tease me and say, you're a jack of all trades, master of none. And by the way, there's actually a continuation of that statement that says, jack of all trades, master of none, but sometimes many is better than one. And that's nobody ever says that. Nobody ever tells you the second part of that statement. And so I always took it as, I'm kind of good at a lot of things, but I'm not a master at anything. And I saw that as a negative. But when I took the Air Force test, I realized, wait a minute, there's strength in this. There's something to this. I didn't know what it meant at the time, other than, wow, this is the first time I remember as an adult thinking, there's something here that I can work with. I chickened out at the last minute. What I mean by that is I was going to go in to active duty, and I decided at the last minute, I don't know if I can handle that for 4 years. So why don't I just try this on? And so I went in as a reservist. But what that meant is I went through boot camp. I went through tech school. So effectively I was gone for 5 months. And then I was released to come back into the civilian world and just do my weekends. But that 5 months is all I needed.
Okay.
No, that's all I needed, because I went from being out of control in all areas of my life because I had too many decisions without any discipline and structure, to a place where you didn't have many decisions to make that were yours to make. Everything.
To say the least. I mean, don't they tell you how many times you can chew a piece of food? I mean, like,
pretty much, yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, I probably could have used that when I was 22.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was, one example I remember. If you open up your Foot Locker, your Colt Locker, whatever you call that, you've got 5 or 6 hanging uniforms. The spacing between each hanger on the top had to be exactly the same. I mean, everything was measured. Everything was investigated. There was no such thing as, subjectivity. It was either yes or no, and there was no middle ground.
So I know you well. I have to imagine this, like, I'm just thinking about it like this. How would I do this? Would I do it well? Would I survive this? How'd you do it, man? I mean, did you just 100% submit and you went with it and you did it? I mean, there's no other choice. You either are 100% submitting or you're not. It was it.
It was all about surrender. I mean, it was literally all about surrender. And I quickly realized that, my grandpa, my dad's dad, would always say, Brian, you've got to have a schedule. You got to have a schedule. And, I just poo-pooed it and laughed at him. I mean, I was again, footloose and fancy free. That's the way I was raised. But
right.
There was something to that incredible structure and discipline that they gave me that ironically gave me a sense of freedom, more so than the freedom that I had from just making my own decisions.
So, okay. With So were you going to be did you want to be an airplane pilot? Or like, if you think the Air Force, look, you don't join the Air Force to like fill up the planes with gas, do you? Or like, because here I know a lot of people in the Air Force, but I don't know any Air Force pilots.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's a special, unique thing. Is that what you wanted to do, or was it?
I knew that the Air Force, if I looked at Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, I knew that Air Force was the one branch that would bring in the highest quality. You know, I didn't want to be an Army guy because I knew that was just going to be a bunch of grunts, right? And I don't know, maybe I was being a little bit discriminatory, but I thought, well, Air Force is probably the safest place to be. So my area of study was communications, computer systems operation. And so, you know, if I would have been active duty, I would have been a programmer. But because I was a reservist, I ended up being trained on a lot of computer system stuff, which I knew very little about. But again, yet another infusion of a really cool life skill, because I had to learn how to solve problems, you know, within, computer systems. Another thing I'm just realizing as we're talking about this is that I tried to keep a low profile in boot camp, and I did my own thing. But you know what happened is the guys like me that just did their own thing, that just followed the rules, that just try to keep a low profile, they got called out and called up into leadership. And so I ended up out of, 150 guys, I was one of four, I think it was like patrol leaders or squad leaders or something like that. And so, that was probably the first time, again, in my adult life that I was called out and recognized as having some leadership. I didn't even know what that meant. I mean, I just thought leaders yelled at people, but it was the first time that I had been called out by someone else in a professional environment to say, you have something and you can't hide from it. You can't hide from it.
That's really beautiful. I mean, I honestly, I have moments like that in my life too, where people have called me out for saying, like, you're really good at this, you should go for it. And you almost don't believe them. It's almost like one of those things where it's like, really? I am?
Right.
And I bet that changed you completely. I mean, that's like it's one of those moments where you don't feel it at the time where it's a 180. You don't feel it like it's a big stake in the ground, but you look back and like, wow, I started actually believing something after that. So what did you do in the Air Force after you get out? Like, what's the coolest story you got of being in the Air Force?
I have like no cool stories about the Air Force. Okay. Wait, well, hold on. I do. So during the first Gulf War, so that was what, 1990-ish, first Gulf War?
Yeah.
I was at Mitchell Field at the 440th, which I don't know if the 440th exists anymore, but I was at the 440th.
General Mitchell Field in Milwaukee. Yep. Got it. MKE.
I was in a communications center. So picture this. It's like this giant bunker that has like 38-foot, concrete walls. And I had a top secret government security clearance.
It really is cool.
So I was only one of, I think, less than 10 people, like in the entire city, that could go into the comm center. Because what was happening in this thing is, I had a bunch of old computer systems that are just, printing out that old dot matrix printer stuff. And, we're getting all this intel about things that are going on in the Gulf. And I remember at one point in time, this message traffic would be coming through these computer systems. And every once in a while, an alarm would go off and it would say, like, top priority. And we were there when I think it was the 128th Air Refueling Group, when they got called up to be deployed. I was in the comm center at the time, so we were like, I'm like, wow, I know this is happening before the entire unit knows they're about to be deployed to go to Iraq. So that was pretty wow. But 99% of it was like trying not to fall asleep.
I could only imagine. I mean, it's still pretty cool though that you had a role that was neat. So I want to fast forward a little bit. So you're in the Army, I guess. Or not in the Army, Air Force. What makes you leave, and what makes you not a lifer, I guess? What makes you be like, this is cool, but I want to do something different?
Yeah, I think it was as soon as I finished tech school and came back as a reservist that I knew that I couldn't. I took everything I could get from it, I learned discipline, but in the Air Force, there was a ton of what they call hurry up and wait, just a lot of dead time, a lot of downtime. And I thrive in high energy situations. I can't sit still. And I very quickly knew that I am not cut out to be in this space long term. So it was actually, I think 2 years later, and I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but I was 25, and the girl I was seeing at the time, we got pregnant, and that's a whole nother story, but
yeah. So, I mean, this is a big moment in your life. You've seen somebody, you get pregnant, and
yeah, huge. Like another one of those. I woke up I remember I was taking a nap one day, and I woke up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a dad. I'm 25. I don't have a career. I don't have a degree. I have no clue. I'm still trying to figure stuff out. I'm just having fun. I'm not really even getting along with this girl that I'm dating. So what do we do? But this is the right thing to do. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to figure out a way to make it work. We're going to get married. We're going to have this baby. And we did. And very shortly afterwards, I wrote a letter to the base commander, and I said, is there any way I can get out of this? Just, I got a lot going on. And they said, okay. Gulf War was done. So, it was just kind of an easy tap out.
Huh. Okay. And I mean, you're a dad now. And I mean, what were you doing after that? I guess what's next? Because look, there's no chance anybody ever says, I want to be a mortgage loan officer, like prior to doing it. It's one of those things you fall into. So like,
oh my gosh. Well, I'll accelerate that. So a year into this marriage, things don't work out. We split up. I'm in, I'm living at my grandparents in their basement, and
grannies or
no, this is different grandparents. So Granny's still up at the lake. So now I'm 26 and 27, and I'm divorced, and I've got a 4-year-old boy, and I still don't have a career. I had gone back to school after the Air Force when I got married, and I went to Concordia, and I got a degree in education, because in my mind I was like, okay, let's see. My wife is 21. She doesn't have a degree. If I get a teaching job, I can teach. And then in summers, I can stay home with our son, and she can go back to school. Like, master plan, this is all going to work out.
Right.
So I got my teaching degree right about the time she and I split up. And I quickly realized there's no money here. Like, I can't make money. So I'm now 27, 28 years old. I'm
divorced, single dad.
I move into this guy's basement in Wauwatosa to pay him $300 a month for rent. The place is infested with cockroaches. It got flooded twice during storms. I got a job as a workers' compensation claims adjuster at Liberty Mutual. I did that for a year and a half. I made $26,000.
Oh my God, you did that?
So now, then I took a job.
Lasted that long? I can't believe it lasted that.
A year and a half. And then I got a raise, and I went to, I wanted education background and computer background. I'm like, I have a teaching degree, and I was in the Air Force for education. And so I became a trainer, and I worked for them for a year and a half, and I made $33,000 a year. So I did that for a year and a half, and then I got a call. I was looking at jobs, and I saw this ad agency that wanted an account manager. And this is right when websites started coming out. I'm like, this looks really cool. So I took that job because they were going to pay me $45,000.
It's awesome. I mean, that's huge. Big difference.
I'm taking these baby steps, and I'll never forget my dad saying, you should be thinking big time. You should be thinking like 60,000. And it was about that time. So this is taking me back 22 years. So I was 31. Okay. And I went out to dinner with my dad, and he said, I'm concerned about you. You've been divorced for a number of years. You don't have a career. You don't have any money. I'm like, thanks for reminding me of these things, Dad. But
I know, right?
I need to do something. He said, I know a couple guys that are running a mortgage company, and they rented space next to me in my office. And he said, would you go talk to these guys? And I said, sure. So I went and had a meeting with these two guys that were with a company that's no longer in existence. One of the guys sat there.
Who was it? People still around?
Yeah, the company was called Ameristar. So Tom Schauer, and I think he's retired, and Gordy Schubert, and I think Gordy's mostly retired.
Okay.
But I said, look, here's the deal. If you give me a 3-month guarantee equal to the $40,000 that I was making in my last company, I will make this work. And this is about the time that I met my now wife, Kathy, and she said, I'm really concerned that you're going 100% of commission. I said, well, it's not 100% commission. I'm guaranteed for 3 months. And she said, you're going to promise me if this doesn't work that you're going to get a real job. And I said, okay. And that was it. Like, that was the moment. And when I met with the guys that were running the company, they said, one guy showed me a check that he had made $60,000 in a month. And the other guy talked about the ability to build a career. And I had these two guys that took a chance on me. And I said, I'll do it. I was in an office all by myself. I used to set up like fake computers to make it seem like other people work there. And, that first year, I think I made 50 grand, and it just, the hook set into me. And all the things that I learned in my life just took hold. I realized that I needed to work for myself. I became passionate about it. I started seeking out mentors and coaches and trainers. And this, that was 22 years ago. That was the biggest transitional period in my entire life. And yeah.
I really love that, Brian. And look, I want to be super respectful of your time with this. Man, I think I'm going to have you back on. I mean, truly, like I could just peel back layers and layers and layers of this. I know this is so fun. I enjoy your story. I know a lot of other people are going to as well. So I want to just button this up though with mortgage loans. So you've risen to a level in the mortgage field that a lot of people would never dream of making. I mean, you coach people that do $100 million in business. I mean, you've reached this level. And I guess from that first job where, look, these people are given a chance to you, was it just the money? What really pushed you through? What got you to the point where you're this, servant leader? You're this guy that really wants to inspire greatness out of people. What gets you to the point where you're just this, going from being coached, learning it all, to being the person that you're actually lifting people up?
Yeah. I think it all stems back to what I talked about, really early on. And that is that, I look at my personal life mission as to encourage and inspire other people to live into greatness and overcome their fear and limiting beliefs. And I say that fast, it's just, it's a part of my DNA. And, I look at, the different hats I wear in the industry, right? Running a mortgage company, running a team, building a culture, coaching and mentoring, everything that I do, the money is great. I won't lie. I mean, Zig Ziglar once said something like, money is not the most important thing, but it's pretty close to oxygen. I mean, it's given me the ability to do some really cool things. And, money does solve a lot of problems. There's no doubt about it. But, at the end of the day, it's about seeing other people break through. It's still, I still overcome my own things and limiting beliefs. And I just think there were so many people in my life, from Granny to, the Air Force, to Tom and Gordy, to all the coaches that I've had, that have poured into me and made a huge difference. And I really believe that I have a responsibility to do same with other people. And it's not just, it's an obligation, man, it's an opportunity. Like, it's cool. Like, there's nothing more exciting for me to see other people break through and do things that they never would have believed possible, because I was able to help them to break through a limiting belief. Nothing that to me is so much more than money.
Brian, your eyes twinkle. Like, I'm serious with that. Like, it's just one of those things where it's just like, you really do love that. Like, you can't hide it. It's just like, it just oozes out of you. I love that. So cool. It's kind of a build off of leave people better than how you found them. Yeah. I mean, that's just like, it's like a way of life, and you just do it every day. And it's super cool. So I have a couple questions that I ask all our guests. I'm going to run through them. But first is this. Do you ever feel like you got a big break?
Yeah. Man, I think the big break was going to Granny's. I think the big break was being introduced to Tom and Gordy. I think the big break was my mom. At one point was really, she helped get me out of the party house, the pit, in lacrosse. I mean, and every single one of those was just a decision point. I mean, it was like this window or the door opened. I still had to step through it, but
Right.
each one of those was an opportunity, is maybe the way that I would phrase it, as opposed to a break, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't choose it. You kind of just you got lucky in a lot of ways, and you probably didn't feel that way at the time. Was there ever a time, Brian? I mean, I've listened to your story. I mean, I can only imagine the hardship. Was there ever a time that you thought about giving up?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It still happens. It still happens. I say this all the time, Jimmy. Part of the reason I love coaching is because in a big part of it is I'm coaching myself, right? It's therapy. It's therapy talk. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think I can talk to you or talk to somebody else about their business or their life, and I can see things from a perspective that I can't see, even though it's going on with me, I can't see it, right? It's the old adage that you can't see your own golf swing, right?
Right.
Um, and there's a saying that, I shared this with you earlier. Your doubts are liars and your fears are traitors. Doubts and fears hit me every single day. And there are, you can talk to my wife and she'd say, oh, I can give you dozens, if not hundreds of times where Brian just wanted to throw in the towel on it. But here's the thing. It's the difference between wanting to do something and making a commitment to do something. If you make a commitment to do something, you just say, there's no way. I might get lost along the way. I might, buy into the lies. I might buy into the doubts on a temporary basis, but the fundamental commitment to serving and helping other people in that personal mission is so overwhelming. I can't stay there for long before it rips me out.
That's just so real. I love that. I mean, I think everyone struggles with that. And it's just like, it's one of those things where you can kind of look at the facade of the person and be like, wow, they're just Superman. And they're just like this unemotional brick. But the truth is, we all have this thought, like, what if we just, threw in the towel? And I mean, it's just so real to be able to admit it. Like, of course it's hard.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. This is a great segue. So actually, I'm going to struggle with the segue, but so, okay. You are so well known. Like, there's so many people that know who you are, and a lot of people look up to you, and they look at, Brian's this coach. He does all this volume. He's making all this money, or whatever it is that they're looking up to. And people who look at it like that's impossible to achieve that type of a level, or maybe, hey, I can do it. But I guess in your perspective, Brian, have you made it?
No, I don't think that there is ever a level of achievement, in any realm that you say, well, that's it. It's new windows that open all the time. It's new levels of challenges. It's new levels of, wait a minute, why do I think that that's all there is? Why don't I think that there's something beyond that? And none of it is a self-serving, I want to win, or I've got this. It's all about, the more I open up and listen, and the more I see additional opportunities, there are so many people out there right now that, if there's a continuum of what you believe about yourself and, where you fall on that foundation, there's millions of people that are so far away from even scratching the surface of what they think is possible with themselves. I don't think there's no such thing as perfection there, but continued growth, Kaizen, the concept of small improvement every day. I believe that, and will practice that until the day that I die.
What an awesome answer. I love that. If you were to do it all over again, what would you change?
gosh, that's such a hard thing that's so difficult to answer, because I just question whether or not I would be the man I am today without having to, everything that I went through placed me in a position to make a decision. And that decision in every time I'd had to make a decision in a difficult thing, it forged my character. So, you know, I can think of decisions along the way that I'd say, I probably wouldn't do that one. But I don't know that I would, you know, my life is so rich the way it is because of all of I don't know that I'd even change some of the things that happened to me when I was a kid. I don't think that I would be who I am today with a sense of self-awareness or, you know, empathy or what. I don't think I'd have that without any of that. So I don't know. Maybe that's a cop-out answer.
No, I don't think so. I think it really is. You've shared with me one time, and we related on this, that actually me and you met a long time ago. And long story short, I didn't work with you or whatever it was. And I think about that time in my life where, man, I wish I would have, but I don't think I was ready for it. And I think that you shared with me that you met Kathy, you guys figured it out, that you guys met each other a long time before you had an actual relationship.
Yeah.
And would you have made it had you have, started a relationship then? Probably not, because of the person you were at the time.
Right.
Awesome. So last question. You coach a lot of people. So this is honestly, this is a tough question to ask, but to sum it up into just one answer, what advice would you give to anybody looking to get it done?
Yeah, I think I think one piece of advice that I would give would be really invest in looking at building a vision of what you would like to see in your life. You know, one of the assignments that I give to people is I want you to sit down and write a letter to yourself from the future. So 5 years is a good time period. You know, so it's whatever, October of 2025. Write a letter to yourself from the future and say, hey, Jimmy, it's Jimmy. Here we are. This is what life looks like. This is what our relationships look like. Here's what our professional world looks like. Here's what's going on in our world of our finances. Here are the things that we've done to grow personally. Here are the things we've accomplished. And it's essentially just kind of drafting up the vision of your best self and make it rich with technicolor, sight, smell, sounds, so powerful that when you read that vision, you're so excited, because what'll start to happen is if you can get that vision of yourself, your brain will find a way to get there, and then just pursue it relentlessly. And again, don't buy the lies, don't buy the doubts, pursue it relentlessly. Get a coach to help you out, surround with support, think, and lift you up. And just live your life with intention and purpose.
Brother, that's gold. I mean, that's such gold. I'm like, I want to go write my letter right now. Hey, it's Jimmy. That's awesome. So Brian, I want to thank you. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Brian, especially for coming on. Brian, how can people get in touch with you if they're looking to connect?
Yeah. So you can reach me at briankludt.com. And if you want to shoot me an email, just briankludt@gmail.com. Pretty simple.
All right. Awesome. So beautiful. So this has been the Get It Done podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you want to support the show, please tell a friend, write a 5-star review, or hit the subscribe button. All those things make a huge difference in helping us reach more people. Once again, I'm Jimi Ryan. Thank you again for listening, and many more stories on the way.